Hello everyone, and thank you for your participation to this first webinar on the technology sector. Before giving the floor to Richard and therefore to the added value you are expecting, I would like to say a few quick words about Altiplano Open Research. We strongly believe that the new approach to investment research is unstoppable. Altiplano is a client-centric bespoke model that channels network effects and provides solutions to three secular trends. The first one is regulation, leading to oligopolization, juniorization, and challenge of the historical equity research model. The second one is disruption of old school formats, distribution, and production with digital. The third one is the need for independent premium research at a time when international emancipation is underway and independence is questioned. In other words, investors should pay for what they get and not for what they believe they get. Through an online research platform that incorporates the whole process of research consumption, Altiplano offers a disruptive alternative method of releasing intelligence through an open architecture, cherry picking research providers and paying as you go. So in other words, we're working to make Altiplano Open Research the brand that both helps independent research solve out visibility issues they encounter with investors to build a real personal brand, helps investors have access to premium alternative research and place research budgets into Altiplano one-stop shop. Thank you. Richard, it's up to you now.
Thank you very much, Francois. There are a few familiar names on this call, so perhaps some of you remember me from up to 15, 16 years ago, in which case, nice to speak to you again. Quick update for what's happened since then. So when you last may have seen me, I was doing global communications equipment for Nomura Securities. 2012, no real market left for in-depth research. So I went out on my own. Radio Free Mobile is my own company. And effectively what we do is we help people to understand the digital ecosystem, how they all fit together, what Apple really thinks, what Google really thinks, how to understand Meta and Amazon and Baidu and Tencent and Sea and all of these internet companies that have come to completely dominate the discussion when it comes around to the mobile internet. We've obviously taken this on a bit further. We now also cover digital automotive, artificial intelligence, and we cover these things from the point of view of long-term strategic thematics. I'm not about to sit here and tell you what you should or shouldn't buy, because quite frankly, I think you should make that decision yourself. You shouldn't need me to tell you what to do. But what we try and do is give you a view over 5, 10, maybe 15 or even 20 years. What are the themes that are going to run through this industry? And most importantly of all, who's going to win, who's going to lose, and why? And that's why we comes onto the metaverse, because if you look at the dominance of the smartphone today when it comes to the mobile internet, effectively the smartphone remains unchallenged. Now, the last disruption was in 2007. The best opportunity for disruption in this market is the metaverse, which is why we're focusing on it now. We're also focusing on it now because if you were to say what is the single largest risk to Apple's valuation, to Google's valuation, it's that they get the metaverse wrong, i.e. they do a Nokia in 2028 rather than 2007. And this is one of the reasons why one wants to focus on the metaverse now, or at least be aware of it, because as the title of the presentation clearly says, it's going to take a long time. So let me run you through a few main points, and what I'll do at the end is I'll summarize what I think you should remember. There's a ton more research that goes behind this. I'm just going to gloss over it really quickly. And also to note, you may have known this is volume 1. This is a two-part piece of research. Volume 1 is what is the metaverse? How does it work? What does it require to take off? And how long is it going to take? Volume 2 will be here are all the players, and this is what we think of them. And so from that perspective, volume 2 will be out in another month or so. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So what is the metaverse? Well, this is how we see it. Effectively, what it needs to be is the next generation of the internet. Think of Internet 2, Internet. What we have today is effectively what we would call Internet 2.0, which is mobile phones and desktops and tablets connected to each other, also via the cloud. And you enable voice, video, pictures, and other bits and pieces. And it's fairly straightforward. 3 is that functionality is built on to give you a much greater role for the cloud, but also a more immersive environment. So you can go into it more, you can have your own avatar, you can have a interaction. What that does is it means that the whole nature of the internet changes. Effectively, the way to think about it is effectively from 2D to 3D, but also very importantly is any device that can connect to it. This is not a you must have a pair of glasses evolution. It's not. The idea here is that if you wear a headset or a pair of glasses, you will get a more immersive interactive experience. But critically, any device can attach to it. So if I have my smartphone like I have here, this provides me a 2-dimensional window into the 3D world. And that's the most important thing. The second most important thing, there can be only one. And right now, everybody's building their own version. So from that perspective, something's got to change, or this whole theme is likely to fall completely flat on its face. Now, also, why do we think of it as an evolution of the internet? Well, very simply, what we also looked at when we started to look at the metaverse is, all right, 3D interactive environment's great. What does it need to take off? And we've identified 7 characteristics or hurdles or criteria, whatever you like, for the metaverse to take off. Now, when we look at the internet on these 7 characteristics, and I will go into them in a little bit more detail, what you notice is the internet that we have today ticks every single box, and it ticks it perfectly. So what you're really looking at here is the metaverse becomes the internet when you turn all of these unhappy faces into smiley faces. And the big question, of course, is, well, when? And that's what we look at here. Here are the 7 pillars in a little bit more detail. We split them into 3 buckets. Bucket number 1, predominantly hardware and engineering issues. This would be optics, lenses, compute, 5G, and so on and so forth. All the hardware sorts of things and the software, so that to get the thing to work properly. After that, you have what we've called the software, business and strategic issues. This is around the platform and, most critically of all, interoperability. From there, you also have the 3rd pillar, or the 3rd group, which are the software and services issues. This relates to payments and content. Okay, so myth number 1 I'd like to explain, and again, this is my opinion, is getting the hardware right. Most people think is the most difficult problem. I respectfully disagree, and I respectfully disagree simply because if you look at meta platforms and you look at Google and everybody else is investing, Microsoft who's investing in this space, they're investing $10 billion a year each in trying to get this right. When you throw and these are the issues that we're facing, they're predominantly engineering based. So you throw enough money at them, they'll get them right eventually. The bigger problem, in my opinion, is the interoperability, making sure everybody works together with everybody else perfectly, because that's what you need for the metaverse to really take off, because that's what it's needed for it to be just one. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. Let me just tell you a little bit about the timing. So here we are. Here's how we see the order of the 7 pillars. So what you really see is you've got 2 tracks, the software and services track at the bottom, and the hardware and the platform track at the top. Now, what you notice is the first criteria, you've got to get the hardware right before you can even get off the starting block. There's an element of truth to that, although we suspect the networking, i.e. 5G, and the compute, i.e. the cloud, elements of it will be ready before the hardware is, and then you've got the platform and the interoperability issues to deal with. And what you can see is, look at the timeline. We're looking at this thing 2030 something before it really gets going. And let me touch on why we think that is the case. So this is the transition to the smartphone. Some of you have been around for as long as I have. You'll remember this and you'll have experienced it firsthand. Back in 2000, Nokia launched, 2001, Nokia launches the first smartphone. It's another 6 years before someone launches something that people want to use to a large amount, and another 5 years after that before it really starts to take off and go through the mass market. And a few more years after that before it becomes fully embedded right the way across the market. What that's telling you is that it took 16 years from inception of a half decent product before it was fully penetrated in the market. If we take the same example with the metaverse, now it's going to be, to fully experience the metaverse in all of its glory, you're going to need some kind of head-mounted display. Okay, now that the Oculus Quest 2, I recommend you all try it, because it's one of those things you really have to experience it in order to understand it. It solves a lot of the historical issues. It's cheap, it works well, it's fun to use, but it still has massive issues. And so from that perspective, we think it's going to be at least another 5 years, 4 to 5 years, before someone comes up with the equivalent of the iPhone for the metaverse. And then it's going to be another couple of generations, and then you go into the hockey stick. And so what you end up with, we're looking 10 plus years from inception to mass market, and even longer to completely replace the smartphone. Again, notice here, what we're saying is that the metaverse itself, or the head-mounted displays, or whatever you use to access the metaverse, is going to be, if the metaverse takes off in the way that people predict, it is going to take attention away from the smartphone. It's going to take traffic away from the smartphone. It's going to take usage away from the smartphone. And that's what we see as the main disrupting point. For example, if you've got a great service that you currently use on your smartphone, and someone invents a way to make that service so much better on a head-mounted display, chances are people start, while they're carrying both, the usage will migrate from the phone to the headset. And if you increasingly do that for all of the other digital life services that you have on the device, you're going to end up with a situation where the smartphone becomes increasingly irrelevant. And that is the key disruption point. That is why Apple has to address the metaverse in some way or other in order to protect its legacy. And that's exactly the position that Nokia was in back in 2007. So we're looking at a long time. So from an investment perspective, you've got a long time to think about it. Let me just briefly touch on the hardware. It's going to be a head-mounted device, largely because the ideal hardware is basically the Matrix, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. So this is what you're really looking at for the metaverse to take off within a 20 to 30 year time frame. Now, what that also means is that if we look at 2025 as the time when you get a decent head-mounted display, one thing that did hold up the smartphone revolution considerably was availability of 4G. Now, if you look at 2025, Ericsson is already predicting there's going to be about 3 billion 5G connections out there, and the cloud market is going to be 3.5 times the size that it is today. That leads us to think that these, unlike smartphones, the network in the cloud is not going to hold up the rollout of the metaverse once it starts to get going. However, the bigger problem lies here. Let me skip forward, in what we call the surfeit of silos problem. Now, what you want is the metaverse needs to be one. But this is what's being built today. Everybody's doing their own version. None of them interoperate with each other in any way. And there are significant blocks to why they would want to operate. For example, I'm a user. I buy a digital asset, such as a costume in Fortnite. I'm in the metaverse. I'm going to want to take that to Roblox. Now, the problem is that in order to ensure that interoperability that we need for it to take off, Roblox has to say, yes, you can come in with your digital asset, which means foregoing revenue. Now, that's going to be difficult to do, not impossible, But that's the kind of difficulties that are going to face. These are really, it's business and strategic issues that are going to hold this up, not so much any technicalities around what could be possible from in terms of an interoperability perspective. This is the surf eat of silos problem. This is where we are today. This is the trajectory we are on, is down this road. However, where it needs to go is here. So what happens is, instead of having their own metaverse, what all of these companies create is a piece of real estate within the larger metaverse, just as they do today. You know, Apple has got its own destination, its own services that you can get there from pretty much anywhere. Pretty much the same thing needs to happen in the metaverse, so that I can play, I can interact, I can meet with, I can travel to Roblox's destination from Fortnite or on PlayStation or from a Magic Leap device or whatever it is. That's what needs to happen. Now, this is why the game engines are so interesting, and in particular from a listed company perspective, Unity Technologies, because this is what they're doing today. Effectively, what Unity does is it allows game developers to write their games once, and it will then do all of the porting onto the different platforms, and also enable to some degree the interoperability that exists today. Now, games are very important. The metaverse is likely to grow from the gaming industry for two reasons. One, almost all usage today is games, and two, games are 3D interactive metaverse environments already. And so that's why Unity is particularly interesting, because it's in a good position to be the great enabler of the interoperability of the metaverse. I'm not saying you should rush out and buy Unity. The stock is extremely expensive, and those who know me know that I am a value-oriented investor. It has fallen a long way. It hasn't fallen far enough, in my opinion. The other one is Unreal Engine, which is part of Epic Games, which is 40% owned by Tencent. The company still basically is private, and so there's no real listed way to get onto that. The other thing worth mentioning is, why is one metaverse so important? It's because of Metcalfe's law of networking. Why is the internet so valuable? Why does it create so much utility today? It's because whether I'm an iOS user or a Google user or a Baidu user or a Tencent user, I can still interact with anybody else in a fairly free and open way, which means that the internet today is an amalgamation of interoperable digital ecosystems, which means the network is one. Now, Metcalfe's law of networking basically states that if you've got the same number of users on one network, or the same number of users divided among many networks that don't talk to each other, the value of the one network is many, many times greater than the individual networks when they're all added up. And this is the crucial value. This is why you have to have one metaverse. If there isn't one metaverse, what you're going to end up with is a series of niche offerings for specific things, say gaming or 3D content watching or real estate tours or education. Is going to remain vertical, siloed, and it won't generate the kind of value that everyone is getting really excited about. Let me also just jump quickly onto payments, because this is also worth mentioning. General rule of thumb, again, I want to blow another myth away. General view seems to be out there, the metaverse requires crypto. Why? There is no earthly reason that I can see why why the existing payment rails cannot be used to run the economy of the metaverse, and there aren't any. The other issue, of course, is that crypto in its state today is wholly unsuited to running an economy. So we've done a compare and contrast here about what does a payment system need to be successful in a digital ecosystem. Well, it's got to be low cost, flexible, fast, and the medium of exchange has to be stable in its value. If you look at Alipay, you look at WeChat Pay, they both tick all of these boxes and are incredibly successful because of this. Now, if I look at the two leading cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they are none of these things. They are wholly unsuited to running the metaverse today, and especially when you do small transactions, they get incredibly expensive. So from that perspective, the problem is crypto needs to become really boring in order to be able to run the metaverse. And if it becomes really boring, no one's going to be interested in it. And again, this is another reason why I am cautious on the whole crypto craze at the moment, because it's these factors that make it interesting, and when it becomes boring, no one will be very interested in it. So what are we looking for in terms of takeoff? So this is, if we look at the metaverse today, the metaverse is an irrelevance when it comes to usage. So what we do when we look at one of the ways we analyze the digital ecosystems is we look at the thing called digital life. Digital life is what do users do with devices divided by time. If you take the metaverse, i.e. virtual reality, it's basically gaming and media consumption. You've got 20 minutes of usage today, and maybe there's 10 million users, maybe 20 million by the end of this year. If we look at mobile devices, we've got a much wider range of services, i.e. all your digital life, 252 minutes a day and 5 billion users. If we convert that into minutes of use per day, the metaverse as it stands today is less than 0.01% of all activity. It's an irrelevance. It's also an irrelevance economically. However, the reason why it's important to look at this is because it is when you start to see these services move from here into the metaverse, and this pie starts to look more like the digital life of mobile devices does today. It's when this usage number starts to grow, and maybe even this usage starts to come down. This is the sign of the critical inflection point that we highlight here, when the metaverse starts to take off and the relevance of the smartphone starts to decline. So that really, for us, is the key thing to look for. So basically, in summary, the metaverse, there can be only, what should you remember? There can only be one metaverse. Interoperability is by far the most difficult issue to solve. The technical engineering issues are likely to get solved given how much money is being thrown at it. It's going to take a very, very long time. We're looking at this thing going exponential takeoff mass market, 2028, 2029, somewhere around about there if you model it on the basis of the smartphone. And number 4, you do not necessarily need crypto in order to run the economy of the metaverse. And fifthly, we're at the really early stage. If you look at where we are today, we're kind of like in this blue arrow just at the starting gate. And where all the players are roughly, we put Meta Platforms is definitely ahead with Oculus. Oculus has 100% market share of unattached devices and a very large share of attached devices. And this is where developers make money today. So currently Meta is a long way in the lead. At the back here, you've got Tencent, Apple, Google, and Alibaba, largely because they haven't laid out their store for where they're going to go in the metaverse. So we're unable to place them in this category. But what you can see is there's a bunch of companies here. The ones to really, I think, to keep an eye on for the immediate term are NVIDIA, not necessarily maybe for investment purposes, but for to see where the sector is going, Meta Platforms, Unity, and Roblox. From an investment perspective, the problem you've got is, in my opinion, I mean, there's an ETF out there. There are stocks that you can buy in theory. The problem you have is the metaverse is not really going to impact these companies' fortunes and their share prices for a very, very long time. So if you want to buy the metaverse theme, fine, buy these stocks. But in the interim period, you've got to be comfortable with, for example, the outlook for Unity in the 2D games industry for at least another 5 to 6 years, in order to make sure that you've got value in the investment that you're making. If you can see, and it's quite possible that, whoever leads today may not be leading when the thing actually takes off. Great example, look at Nokia. Nokia was in Facebook's position in 2005, 2006, and we all know what happened. I will leave it there. That was a super fast whistle-stop tour of the metaverse. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. We've got a question from Johannes. Probably you have answered to the question, but the question is the following one: who is best positioned for the metaverse from today's view? And if I may, Johannes, on top of your question, I would say, are there smaller players you can mention today that could have a major impact from the metaverse rather than those big players?
Yeah. Okay.
Who could make it longer?
Yeah, that is a great question. Without doubt, Meta's in the lead. Who is interesting? Well, firstly, one of the interesting places to look is also one of the early phases that's going to happen with the whole metaverse thing is the enterprise. And the reason being is, in the enterprise, if something is useful, it doesn't have to have a very good user experience. So you can get away with clunky headsets and bad vision, bad field of view and augmented reality if it's quite useful. And so there's a whole range of companies that are springing up doing things like digital twins. So digital twins is you could create a digital version of an asset like a stadium or a vehicle, and you can model it and see how it behaves virtually without having to build a prototype, for example. This is digital twins. And so firstly, yes, there are a couple of small companies here that I think are interesting. Varjo is one. It's private. It's in Finland. They make the best VR unit on the face of the earth. They also make the most expensive VR unit on the face of the earth. Nreal is another one. From the listed perspective, the other one I would really look at is Unity and Roblox, but short, medium-term valuation, these things are just too expensive. The other place to look that I found particularly interesting is look at the startup scene in Korea. The reason being is that the Korean culture is quite well versed towards the metaverse already, and they've already got quite a large number of startup companies looking to do things like making the avatars better, like doing real-time translation and changing in real time how the voice and the lip sync works, such that if you're having a conversation with someone in another language, it'd be almost like you're talking to them in English, even though you're not, for example. Have a look at the Korean startup scene, and there's quite a lot of small companies there that look particularly interesting.
Thank you. Another question by Christian. Christian, beyond gaming, what are the most obvious applications in the metaverse?
Okay, great question. What is going to happen? This is how we see it. Firstly, the other one that is quite good is media consumption. If you've ever watched a 3D film on a virtual reality helmet, Quest 2, for example, it's actually pretty good. I was surprised. The first step is, the other use cases for it is these services are going to change and they're going to evolve with time, instant messaging and shopping and media consumption and so on and so forth. As they evolve with time and become more deeper, richer, and change with the hardware that's available, you may well see those to migrate into the metaverse. And that's largely what I expect, and that's what needs to happen if the metaverse is really going to take off. Shorter term, have a look at education. Another short-term use case is also very interesting, is virtual real estate. From the point of view of being able to put on a virtual reality helmet and do a virtual visit to a distant piece of real estate. The degree of understanding of real estate is much better. It's greatly improved through VR. So those are two short-term use cases that I think are going to have an impact in the medium term, but also in the short term. Look towards the enterprise, and that's why all the augmented reality companies, all of them have all pivoted towards the enterprise, because that's where the money is, at least for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Thank you. I'm now taking the last question before we stop this webinar. Jacques is asking, don't you think that the next generation of Ethereum, which will reduce 99% of the mining energy consumption, will be cheaper and therefore offer a good solution for the metaverse?
The answer is potentially yes, because what that would do is it would do two things to our little scoreboard that I've got up here. One, it would flip the payment system it would basically improve this smiley face, and it would also improve this smiley face here, number 3. It would improve 1 and 3, which would be a first step towards making it more appropriate. I'm not saying that crypto will not end up running the economy of the metaverse. There's every chance that it will. What I am saying is, and I think as you've just pointed out, is things need to change with crypto and the blockchain for it to be successful. And so certainly that's how we would look at it. Change those, make those smiley faces happy, and then there's no reason why crypto cannot run the economy of the metaverse.
Okay, I said it was the very last question, but I've got another one. Sorry.
Go for it. Yeah,
Let's go for another one. Regarding lasers, this is Nicola asking, regarding lasers, do you see some solutions emerging, like, for example, HoloRide for easing transporting by gamification?
Sorry, say that again.
Yes, regarding lasers, do you see some solutions emerging, like, for example, HoloRide for easing transporting by gamification?
Okay, is leisure, do you see some? So I'm trying to look at the HoloRide. Man, I don't know. Good question. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what you mean, Nicholas. So from the perspective of if I take what I think you mean, which is basically being able to interact and go places without actually having to move, then yes, absolutely. These will evolve, but in order to do that, the whole thing has to get a lot better. And this brings us to the hardware and engineering issues. You need a much faster bandwidth, you need much higher resolution, you need better quality optics, and all of these things have to be done at a relatively low cost. The way to think about it is for, let's just say, virtual tourism. If I want to go and visit, let's say, Victoria Falls in Zambia, and I'm going to pay, let's say I'm going to pay $50 and I can go virtually. What needs to happen is in order for me to get value from that $50, the technology, the hardware just needs to melt into the background, and I have to be almost aware that it is not there. That's pretty much what's happened with these things. You know, a lot of the services you've just forgotten. You've forgotten about the screen and the touch and the network. You've forgotten about all that stuff because it works so well. It's just melted into the background, and the same thing needs to happen. So from that perspective, yes. From leisure perspective, yes. But because leisure is effectively consumer, it needs to be a lot better in order to really take off than it is today. Did I answer your question, Nicholas? Hopefully I did. Okay, good. Thank you.
So, okay. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you so much, Richard, for
Pleasure.
This fascinating presentation on the metaverse. If you want to interact more with Richard, you can jump onto Altiplano Open Research Platform, create an account. It's very simple, very rapid. You have access to a number of things, a forum with a lot of content, academic research, and you can go to have a glance to Richard's page, research, and the publication. So anything you need about the metaverse or any other topic that Richard can address, please give us a ring, send us an email, or jump to the platform. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon all. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheerio.